Thank you all again for making yourselves available and for really being thoughtful about not just leaving our last conversation to stand by itself, because we've discussed a lot of very important points and we've all shared fantastic ideas. We've come up with the final thoughts during our last conversation that necessitated for us to think about ways of how we implement some of the things that we shared in terms of improving US K through 12 education. Lots of great ideas. If I could just try to summarize that, we talked about how we could improve the sense of agency in children. We talked about potentially about ways of connecting the communities inside schools, both parent communities with teacher and administration communities and children, more, I guess, not tightly, but more effectively, so that there's better dialogues and better coordination of efforts to think on behalf of children and how to develop them going forward. We also talked about how socioeconomic literacy is very, very important for kids to develop as they progress from the K grades all the way through high school, so that they are far better enabled to join adulthood and independent living. And last but not least, we talked about how critical thinking plays this foundational role in everything that we are discussing, not only on the part of children, but also on the part of adults. How that really helps facilitate a lot of positive developments, be it during the education process, but more importantly, as children go into adulthood, as they go into colleges and universities and begin their independent lives. We finished with the thought that we as security practitioners, whom Greg and I represent, we probably maybe don't think deeply enough about those suggestions, and we don't take them into consideration from a strategic standpoint, and we often don't include those thoughts, those ideas into our assessments of school environments. And so we are, at least in most cases today, far more tactically oriented. We are concentrated on active shooter drills. We're concentrated on really addressing a potential incident or a live incident, but we're not thinking about how do we get to those incidents in the first place? Like, what factors drive us to these incidents, and what factors could be part of our preventative efforts, such as developing children's sense of agency, their critical thinking, their peer-to-peer social awareness. Those things are less often on our radar. So this is the summary. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the way in which we can meet the standard of how we move from having an idea to trying to implement or improve things like social emotional awareness, sense of agency, critical thinking, parent and teacher and child community integration, socioeconomic awareness and literacy, and last but not least, inclusion of those elements into our security assessments. Just raise a hand and let me know who would like to start. Greg.
Okay. Hi. So this is actually kind of interesting. Just 2 days ago, I'm reading a book on a totally different subject matter, not security oriented. It's more actually Jewish mysticism. It's kind of interesting. And in it, the author gave an example of 2 types of teachers. One teacher presents, has, well, no matter the subject, has maps, has PowerPoint, delivers a lesson crisp and clear, communicates well to her students, and they're just, everything they could need to understand a particular topic is right there, from handouts, like I mentioned, the PowerPoint or posters. So those that attend the class get that really great understanding of what she's presenting. Then there's this other teacher. In his room, there's nothing on the wall. There's no amazing presentation, but just the general topic. And he withholds from the students like all of the details, because what he wants to spur in the students is discovery. Like as if it's like history, instead of giving a huge, done for you presentation on name whatever historical event, just little points, and then make the students seek out that knowledge, direct them in that pursuit. So at the culmination of which, there's a sense of more investment on the students for getting to that same point and understanding, versus just receiving everything that the other teacher did for them. So that kind of got me thinking in terms of promoting that discovery type of like investment from students, where they feel when they start to like own whatever it is that they're seeking, if you will, instead of just receiving it. Like growing your own apples versus getting one from the store. You water the plant, you grow it, you cultivate it, it sometimes maybe just tastes sweeter because you have more investment in it.
So may I just follow up with one question? It seems to me like you're saying that method of nudging and not lecturing is actually one of the foundational ways in which we can start improving. So may I ask, what would it take? So if you were to think, okay, so look at the schools today. How would you where would you start with standardization of this practice? How would you infuse that into the school system?
Well, you need to pitch that to the Unified School Board, and then it has to meet the curriculums of the state guidelines as well. Provide, again, for public schooling, that is. Private schooling and charter schools may have more latitude. But yeah, pitch towards the superintendents, the what have you, and show this type of method where you're growing a student body that's invested in their education, because it's not just they're there on autopilot and getting everything from their instructors.
I can only add here, and Julie will get to you in just one second. I can only add here that I feel, in addition to what you're saying, it's important to also think and not make assumptions about how prepared the general community of educators is to actually embrace these types of ideas, this mode of teacher learning facilitation, if you will. So I feel like, to some degree, in order to build a larger cadre of education practitioners who are able to deliver in this way, that has to start with their education. That has to go back to their academic experience, so that they could be taught both in academic terms, but also in practical terms, how this actually works. So that when there is a pitch, let's say, to the school board, to the school administration, that the cadre of teachers don't raise their hand and they say, do we have to change the way we've been learning about teaching? We may not know any of these concepts, so how do we adapt? You see, so I just wanted to throw that in there. Julie, please.
Yes, actually, with the current standards, with Common Core and some of the other, the next generation science standards, the idea of inquiry is it's a much bigger topic nowadays. And I know in our district, we have been working on that in science for several years now. And also math has been a big area as well. And it's really not so much about changing a curriculum or anything like that. It's more about a strategy, a teaching strategy, where they work with teachers on questioning, how to question, how to push students to that perfect point where they're frustrated, but not frustrated and unable to function, right? So we learn, all of us that work in IT, right? You know, frustration pushes you to try to find the next solution and to find the next solution. But if you hit the point of a brick wall where there's no other help or no other community, that's where students often will, you know, reach a point and then the learning stops. So it's about professional development for teachers that teaches them about questioning, how to question, how to maintain the patience. And when you're in front of 30 students and you're trying to have everybody working on kind of different activities and pushing them to that point of frustration where you're not giving them an answer to get through the material, where you have to talk yourself a little bit. It's very difficult, believe it or not, to talk yourself into waiting as a teacher and as, you know, just someone facilitating a room. I would venture to say, even if you had a bunch of adults in a room, you really want to just tell them, right? If a bunch of them are asking the same, you're like, let me just tell you so we can get past this. So it's a whole strategy, and I'm happy to say it is a focus now currently where teachers are being taught that more kind of inquiry-based, deductive type methodology, and it's definitely out there and along the lines of project-based learning and you know, challenge-based learning. It's definitely out there, and I do think it's very important. I think that just stories from my own kids working online, learning online now. My daughter said just yesterday, you know how you always tell me to Google it? Just Google it. She's like, that actually helps. And I was like, yes, it does. So when they have to look for their own answers and seek out their own learning occasionally, it's definitely very powerful. And I'm kind of hoping that as we are moving through the pandemic, we are able to reflect back and look at these lessons learned from online, because we hear a lot of criticism. It doesn't work. You know, we know all of the issues of the digital divide. Those are real issues, and we know the struggles. But I would also hope that as a nation and as a world, we could look back and also kind of go, what did we learn, and what are those really good takeaways from online learning and ways that we can apply that going forward? Because I do think it definitely is pushing kids to be more independent learners and people when they have to pay attention to their own meeting times, log on, keep track of everything where they never had to in the past. They're not just being fed, they have to show up to receive the information. Just those little things that we do every day in our workplace, kids don't have to do. The bell rings, they move. Another bell rings, they move. And this way they're sitting at home going, oh, geez, it's 9. I have to, you know, jump on my meeting. So I just hope that we're able to look back and take some of these positive lessons, you know, going forward, because there is a lot of positive.
Thank you. I appreciate that you're discussing positive momentum here. May I ask, was there another topic that you also wanted to touch upon, since we're all kind of on this 5-minute rotation? I just wanted to see if there was something else that was close to your heart from where we concluded, be it agency, critical thinking, and what have you, that you wanted to share with us just as part of how do we improve? What are some of the means and methods beyond what you said?
Yeah, so I've been thinking a lot, just because of online instruction, about how we're preparing students with regard to security, but in the cybersecurity sense, and how when we're focusing on content in classrooms, a lot of focus on, you know, ELA, math, science, social studies, all very important. But I do feel like our students and this generation is growing up in a very different time, and their future looks very different than our own. And I do feel like even those of us in this world, the IT world, we also, you know, sometimes might overlook the idea that it is it already looks different, and it's going to look extremely different for students coming out. And I often think that as far as a topic, we do user awareness training for adults, and we focus on all of these issues regarding cybersecurity. But I think that that's one big area where so we have a bunch of students online, and we have a bunch of students out there connected, and it's not really a topic we do very much with. I don't think on a national worldwide kind of scale. And I think that is an area where our teachers need more training in order to deliver that type of instruction. But I do think we need to shift our focus from kids knowing how to, log on, do activities. Not that they don't need to do that. They need to do that. But we need to shift our focus also. And when we talk about digital citizenship, I think that looks a lot different now than it did just 5 years ago. We're talking about our students growing up in an area, in a time of major data, where they're going to have to really take care of their data, fake, interesting technologies where, video can be faked, voice can be faked, all the fake news, distinguishing what's real, what's not real, spear phishing, and all the different ways, the more sophisticated cyber attacks and that sort of thing. And I feel like that's definitely an area of need that we need to talk about as well. Now that we have all of our kids online, what's missing? That I feel like that's missing.
It seems to me like where you're headed with this is that it also goes back to, I think, 3 levels of ways of achieving progress. Obviously, there should be probably regulation that is system-wide. So which says, okay, so this has to be part of core curriculum, or in one way, in one shape or form, right? So it has, because if you don't have universality, if you don't have consistency, then one school district wins over another, and you're dead in the water anyway. I feel like you're also touching on the need to prepare the teacher community and the administration community to be ever mindful of how to deliver that content to children, how to enable them, how to it would be kind of in the back of their minds at all times, and they would be structuring learning environments so that they would actively deliver that type of information to students from earlier ages, because now, unfortunately, parents are happy to give devices to 4- and 5-year-olds, if not earlier. And so that becomes a bit difficult. I only want to maybe point out that recently I've watched this documentary that's called The Social Dilemma on Netflix. It's put together by a few organizations, but one of them, the Center for Humane Technology. And I think that that documentary really could open a lot of people's eyes to where we're headed with the use of technology that is very sparsely regulated, especially with the increasing and scaling volume of information, which is very difficult to discern what's right and what's wrong, or what's true and what's not. And of course, to your point about the technology still being susceptible to all sorts of different attacks by malicious actors. So I feel like you're definitely raising very important points. I'm seeing the answers probably more in regulatory realm. I see that kind of system-wide consistency that's necessary. I see that the educator community really need to be better prepared, and again, universally so, in order to deliver that education to children from earlier ages, and to be ever mindful that they're already probably ahead of some adults in terms of their ability to use tech. So, and their social cognition develops not only as they interact peer-to-peer physically, but a lot of it is coming from digital sources and digital interaction. So I really value what you said. Thank you. Elio.
Let me unmute there. Many thoughts. I'll try to keep it relatively brief, but I've been taking some notes as everyone else is talking. And the ones of the list you had, the ones I want to really focus on are the critical thinking, the collaboration, and integration of school with community, you know, students, faculty, et cetera. And I've actually seen some of this, having been part of Code Day Phoenix since basically the beginning when Kristen Romaine started it here. I've seen an alternative model besides the Montessori schools I went to as a kid. Like, I know what it looks like to see true active learning, and not just, a lot of schools are moving toward what they're calling project-based learning, which is good. It's a step, but there's a big difference between project-based learning where you just assign some trivial group project and true active learning. And one of those differences is the scope of the problem. And so Julie was talking about, you know, kids need to be asking their own questions. They do, I totally agree, but there's a step beyond that. Before you can ask the questions, you first have to define the scope of the problem. And all the tech companies, all the startups at Amazon, everywhere else, you'd get some one sentence directive of, hey, we need to be able to do X. Like, we need to be able to have customers rate this. Okay, great. What does that mean? What are the systems we need to integrate with? What are the other teams? Like, first thing we do, it's going to be at least a few hours, if not a day. We need to figure out what is the scope? What is the actual problem we're trying to solve? What's going too far? What's going to take us years to solve? And what's the stuff that we can solve within a reasonable time frame? And so that ability to think about just a strategy for then, what questions do I need to ask? What expertise am I lacking? What other people do I need to pull in to get these things answered? Critically important. And at Code Day, we throw kids straight into that. You know, we're like, look, you got 24 hours. And sometimes I'll tell them, actually, you don't have 24 hours. You have like 20 hours, best case, because there's 2 hours at the beginning where we do some stuff to get you ready, which really, when we give them a little project planning advice and stuff, it really helps. That it's so much less friction on the team. Projects get done a lot faster because we forget kids have not been exposed to professional project planning help. And we honestly hadn't thought of that for the first several. And then I forget, like the number 6 or 7, quite a ways in, then we had a woman who actually was an expert in project planning, and we did these little like 15-minute intro talks. And that was the one we had them go through, is here's how you divide up the tasks, here's how you assign people different roles, and here's how you coordinate it all. Because in the past, we had a lot of kids where they get stuff done, and they're like, this kid had done the art, and this kid had done some of the programming, and this kid had done this. And then they get down to the final stretch, they have 4 hours left, and it's like, wait, that's on your computer, and that's on your computer. How do we get all this stuff on one computer? How do we actually put it together? And they had all the pieces, but then they're like, oh, like how they would run out of time getting it put together into a complete game. So there's a lot more. It's an active process. And that leads me to another thing. We have this idea in the US, I don't know where it came from, but it's really pernicious, that learning, if you look at little kids, let's say 2, 3-year-olds, like little kids that haven't really been exposed to schooling at all, some people love being around them, some people find them annoying because they constantly ask questions. What is this? Why is that? Just, they want to know everything. And we forget that the active state of humanity is learning. And it's only when you get told to sit down and shut up and stop asking questions that you move away from that. Some people never do, but some people learn that. They learn you just do what you're told, you don't ask. And so what we need to be doing is, instead of teaching out the curiosity, we need to be honing that skill and teaching them, okay, there are better questions. There are better ways to phrase a question. There are better questions to ask. It's not that, oh, there's no stupid questions. There's not too many stupid questions, but there are better questions. And if we really spend a lot of time getting kids into that mindset of, how do I ask a really good question? How do I think about the question I have in my mind? And can I ask an even better question that will give me better answers and save me more time to find an even better question? And that's what a lot of science is we do, ideally, we do a thing and we're like, well, I think this is true. Let's see if the evidence supports the thing. And then we try it and it works or it doesn't. And a lot of time it doesn't work. But that's important, because now we're like, okay, that thing we thought, it's not actually true. So we're not going to ask any more questions about that because it's not true. But what does that tell us? What's left? What must be true? What are the other ways that this could be acting? And so that's a big thing. And that's the other thing, is we prioritize, because of the metrics fixation, we prioritize getting the right answer. And one thing you learn in programming is there's a lot of different ways to achieve the same goal. And being an experienced dev, it's about trading off pros and cons. So if I'm writing a program and I have like 10 items to sort, bubble sort and call it a day. Who cares? It's 10 items. your worst case scenario is going to happen in sub-millisecond, done. Now, if I'm building a search engine that's going to have billions or hundreds of billions of entries, I don't care how many supercomputers you got, bubble sort is going to take forever, like hundreds of years to finish. So now you need to understand there's a different way to sort things. Now we want to use heap sort, merge sort, quick sort, Tim sort, whatever. There's a lot of options. And understanding that there isn't a right answer, understanding that while quick sort is really quick in most cases and is great, there are cases where it's terrible because it's not stable, and worst case performance is actually pretty bad. And so if you're like, oh, quick sort, merge sort, if you need stability, go with merge sort. That algorithm in this case is a better fit. And so there's a lot of nuance there. We don't teach nuance. We teach the right answer. There was a great anecdote that got passed around on LinkedIn of, and I may have mentioned this last time, so I'll try to keep it brief, but there was a question in school. They said, what's the biggest number you can make with 3 nines? And most people would say 999, 999, right? Just below 1,000. She actually, really clever, she did 9 to the 9 to the 9. So she exponentiated twice, and they marked her wrong. And her dad's like, that's a bunch of BS. That's a way bigger number than, 999. And they actually took it supposedly like all the way up through the school system, and it ended with them. And they were really like, no, like it's going to mess up all our grading criteria. And the guy's like, yeah, but she's right. He's like, I don't care if you do have to mark every other test, because it was asked on a standardized test. He's like, mark them all wrong, because she has the right answer. Your test is wrong. And that's something that I've run into directly, is that we turn the test and the metric into the goal. It's supposed to be a measurement to guide. It's not supposed to be the goal. No one actually cares what you got on your SAT. It's just supposed to be a guide to give some vague measurement of supposedly how intelligent you are, ignoring the fact that some highly intelligent people suck at taking tests, and some people that I'm good at taking tests. I could always get a high grade no matter, I could just, I hate to use the kind of half-ass stuff, just kind of not really work, and I could get a good grade. And that's not fair. It really isn't. There are some people that you don't want me. You want the person who scored really bad, because in this one area, they're really good. You want them. And if your test was properly designed and actually measured the particular, aspects, their skill sets, their knowledge base, if you had a metric that could measure that effectively, you'd be looking at them. But you have the SAT, or you have some other arbitrary standardized test. So you're going to get, I'm not going to say I'm a compromise, but anyway, we have to get better at that. We have to move away from the metrics. I think I'm probably coming up on the time limit here, but I had a whole bunch of other notes. So my main thing is, let's talk about what I hope to see with school. Let's talk about going beyond just project-based. Let's talk about actual active learning. And you really need to get the kids solving problems, and you need to take the teacher, just like we have at Code Day, and just like we've done with Wayfinder Academy, the old, I forget the full saying in education, but get them away from being the sage on the stage, where they're supposedly this omniscient, at least in that subject, individual that knows everything that you'll ever have to know. That's just not practical. There's whole fields where you can't even know a subfield. Like, no one knows that whole subfield in these areas, like post-quantum cryptography. No one's fully up to date on that. And that's one super niche subfield of security. So it has to become more collaborative. And that's exactly what, if you're on an actual team, your manager, if you have a good manager, you're not going to know everything. You can't just go to them and ask them to do it. They don't know. They're managing. They're getting obstacles out of your way and helping smooth over stuff and getting you access to other resources. They don't know the answer. You're the one that has to know the answer. And they're enabling you to work as effectively as possible to solve that. And that's where teachers need to become more of just guides and just say, look, I don't know, but here's how we could figure out. Let me teach you that strategy. Let's figure this out. Figure out what are the questions we need to ask. What's the best way to ask them? Who's the best person that we have access to that we can ask? And that's the kind of skills we really need to be focusing on throughout the entire scholastic career.
Okay, so you're actually, if I'm hearing you right, if I could summarize it in my head, you're actually, in my view, opening a can of worms.
Indeed.
Why? Because any departure from whatever we call core curriculum standards or national education standards. We don't have to call it core curriculum, just for argument's sake. First of all, again, that takes us back to the need to regulate, to the need to make changes system-wide. That also takes us to the realm of academia, where teachers are being developed and prepared. So that is where the new cadre of teachers could be taught these skills that you're discussing.
Can we rewind just 1 minute, though, to something you said? So you said the need, what was it, to standardize, something like that. The thing that I keep pointing out to people, we talk about standardization and metrics and why these are important, and I don't fully disagree. There's an interesting and nuanced conversation there. But everyone is like, oh, we need kids that are innovative, that can think outside the box, and all the other buzzwords and phrases for that. And yet we have to standardize everything. There is a fundamental, there's a paradox here. Innovation is non-standard. Innovation is fundamentally saying, here's a whole new way no one's ever thought of to do this before. That's innovation. It's impossible to have a standardized measurement of innovation. That is a paradoxical ask. And while we're focused on standardization, we're never going to be teaching innovation. You can't do it.
The way I used the word standard or standardization is simply from a regulatory perspective. If I were to go back to regulators, they have to apply this new set of rules, even if it opens possibilities for non-traditional and out-of-the-box thinking. That still has to happen, in my view, system-wide. So the way I'm thinking of standardization is I don't like inconsistencies, because what happens is then one school district does this and another one says, we're not obligated, so we're not going to do it. Okay, there's a significant argument that I know from a historical and sociological perspective that Yuval Noah Harari has made about our inability to stop certain states from developing nuclear weapons. Okay, so the analogy, in my view, is very similar. If one, or to the same degree, this race to develop weaponized AI and so on, right? If there's 2 or 3 states that are pitted against each other, they're never going to agree to stop arbitrarily on their own to develop harmful technology, because they're going to say, their argument is going to be, yeah, but they're doing it, so how can we lose in that race? So I always take a step back and say, okay, from a national perspective, I have to, from a regulatory stance, apply this infusion of, let's say, more innovative thinking, but I still have to tell the school districts to do it. I still have to enable them and say to them, no, the way you're practicing core curriculum, the way you're developing education it needs to change, and here are some of the models and methods, okay? You do have to have some baselines to say, well, how are we going to assess how our children are developing under these new learning objectives, or not learning objectives, but learning methods. And at the same time, you have to go back to academia and tell them that the way they're teaching teachers, the way they're preparing teachers, is also, it also requires change. So I think we're on the same page in terms of this, I think, this caution about standardization, but I don't mean standardization at the end of the student. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the standardization for regulators who need to agree and say, okay, this is what the country is going to do.
Yeah. So speaking of asking the right questions, yeah, I agree with you. That's the question we should be asking is, can we standardize a process that leaves enough flexibility to the schools themselves, and that results in these kind of outcomes? Because I think that's what everything I've been involved with education, they focus on the curriculum. I'm like, guys, it's not the curriculum. It doesn't really matter. It's not that it doesn't matter at all, but the most important thing is the process. What is the environment that people are in? Is that conducive to these mental modes? because I don't care what you do with the curriculum. If you stick it in the same, everyone sit down and, sit at your own desk and don't work together, because we tell kids to do their own work for how many years with a few token group projects. And then you throw them into the workforce and they're expected to work on like, a 5-person team. Where's that going to come from? It's going to take them a few projects to get used to that. They haven't done that at all. So yeah, I agree. That's a really good question. Can we standardize I wouldn't even say the creation of the instructors, but can we standardize just a higher level framework? And that's a really useful question. What do you standardize?
I like the word framework. I love the word framework because I think that the people don't pay enough attention to how frameworks actually could help enable flexibility, if you will. Because I work on projects as a consultant where the starting point is the framework. And then we enable the client to actually react to the framework and then build processes or update processes within their organizations to do better. Okay, and then we build key performance indicators and all sorts of measurements around it. Okay, but you start with the framework. It's not defined. It's defined only at a very high level, but then the rest of it is flexible. There's a lot of collaboration involved and so on. So I really appreciate what you're saying. So we have now completed the first round. I appreciate what your thoughts are, and we're all, it seems to me, headed in the direction of enabling, let's say, better system-wide infusion, let's call it, infusion of, let's say, flexible learning facilitation, project-based or more inquiry-based education. And Ilya, please remind me what other term you used outside of project-based learning?
Oh, I use the term active learning.
Active learning. Thank you.
Actually, active holistic learning, I think, is the actual phrase that I forget her name right now. She's done some wonderful work on LinkedIn. But yeah, it's more than just a project. It's how do you solve any generalized problem.
Perfect. Thank you for reminding us. Let me now go back to Greg and let me ask this question. So from what you're hearing, Greg, we both have been around the industry for a long time. We have each probably several dozens or more of assessments of educational facilities, be it higher education or primary education. And then the question is how would you now, having heard what we're all sharing, how would you start making a change to the way we assess? So when we're working on scoping out how we're going to approach looking at a campus site, let's say K through 12, what questions would you ask differently? How would you approach the assessment differently based on what you're hearing?
Well, any assessment, actually, questions is like the operative word. And Ilya even mentioned that earlier about questions, asking questions. And that's what, as consultants, we do. And we want to ask the open questions, not the closed questions. Often a technique on the air security travel, like, where are you going versus, oh, you headed to Dallas. Two different methods. So even in that presentation of the of questions to the stakeholders, so that's actually a standard of mine. It's just asking questions and not necessarily going through a checklist of best practices for securing a school. So, so some of those questions I would have for be it the principals, the board, or if it's teachers, or some of the more, ironically, the more mundane ones of like, what is the process for ABC of someone acting out or what have you? What are the, has there been a situation where someone had to be escorted off campus? So those type of sometimes even uncomfortable questions, but it's questions that are posed to make the protectee think, and the protectee to, in a way, through the question of understanding the possibilities of what can go sideways or wrong if they're not conscious of certain elements that are in their environment. So when I've been in, like, call it a, let's say PTA meeting, but glorified security committee for a school, and I'm the one, kind of like Columbo, if you ever seen the old TV series of, like, yeah, one more thing, I'll keep asking the question, and like that just spurs more debate often, but it helps me, like, drill down to maybe certain vulnerabilities of, like, oh, that never happened here, so we don't do this, or that kind of thing. Yeah, so, and based on what others were saying, it's that you can't often be satisfied, though, with an answer sometimes when doing these types of school assessments. And sometimes there is no answer because no one's thought of it or done it or whatever. But sometimes just the mere question of, like, if it's from theft to someone, could be like a stranger on campus. In California, everything is, like, open. Certain schools may have fences, but usually it's quite open, just walk right in. Where my kids are, make sure they got the fences and the cameras. But yeah, so and the old expression of we don't know what we don't know. And that's a common one I hear. And
Gotcha.
just through the questions is where you get the light.
Okay, I just want to throw my 2 cents in here. I feel like I like this method that Greg suggested, and also Ilya, I think you mentioned too, and Julie, I heard that from you as well. This method of inquiry. I think we as consultants, particularly those that are assessing vulnerabilities and types of threats that are facing school organizations, we could become far more curious and at several deeper layers of breaking down the let's say the school organization into functional operations. Let's say there's going to be a teacher block, there's going to be an administration block, then there's going to be facilities, and there's going to be a few other functions, and we really have to start drilling down into those functions to understand to what degree they're building alignment in terms of like thinking as a team to protect the organization, and at the same time you also want to be asking questions besides the teachers and the principals, vice principals. Does everyone else think in terms of looking for red flags of behavior, looking for disassociated students, marginalized students, just really trying to understand beyond the facade of how the school communicates, because there's always going to be this phrase, we take security of children very seriously, and security of children and staff. Well, that's nice. We've used this phrase now for 100 years, but there needs to be some proof behind that phrase. And I think that from the point of inquiry, I would want to have more concerted effort in designing my interview with each of the stakeholders in the school to really understand not only how each of them thinks, but how their thinking is aligned. And I've recently run through a process, a similar process in another organization, where we were talking about what might be considered a mission critical asset, right? So I started asking that same question of every single senior executive, and every single one of them gave me a different answer, okay? And every single one of them had to pause to even understand, like, what do you mean by mission critical asset, right? Perhaps the term could be better explained, but even when I did explain it, they still were sometimes lost, and they couldn't understand like how am I going to define that? What works for my organization, what for my function? And so I feel like I'm hearing from each of you is that there are these wonderful methods for enhancing education, but that also, as a derivative, creates a better community. It creates more enabled children. It creates better integration. So I would want to test a school facility in terms of those accomplishments as a security practitioner. I would want to find out, is the school headed in the right direction relative to exploring curiosity and building school teams, school communities, partnership among children, working in teams, and really paying attention to who might be marginalized, where could there be some issues, for example, with children either conducting some cyberbullying against each other or being subject of bullying either physically or in cyber domain. Is the school paying attention to those things? Because that is the surest way of leaving one child behind, or sometimes several children behind. And if we don't see how the school is using the new methods that you're describing, or thinking ahead and being very proactive and progressive, then unfortunately it would leave a lot of vulnerabilities unexplored and a lot of vulnerabilities to think about. So I'm kind of just thinking of adding to what Greg said.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
The other thing, I'm sure maybe some of the educators understand this as well. When we think of K through 12, it's never one, infrequently have I ever seen one campus K through 12. I know they do exist, but you know, we have like California here, we have a K through 5 is one school, and then you have middle school is another one, high school is another one. And so, and then the district has these bunch of those functional responsibilities for the district, but yet there's even other responsibilities that are part of the county. And so they have a different types of chefs sometimes, and then to find that alignment is tricky. So let's leave it at that.
Agreed. Julie, can I get back to you to see if there is something that you've heard from Elio, Greg, and myself that makes you pause, makes you think about kind of how can we bridge some of the gaps that we're discussing?
Yeah, well, so I was making some notes as well, thinking about, because I am a huge fan of the idea. My kids also, I'm a huge fan of Montessori and independent learning and active learning. And what comes to mind when I think about taking that system and dropping it on all schools nationwide, I think about other parents that I talk to and other communities that I talk to. And recently I was at an event for my kids, and I was talking to another mom, and they brought up the issue again of accountability, right? Of teacher accountability, and why can't, if we have, more testing, so there's more accountability and we can pay people based on their accountability, right? And you have those discussions. And then you have others, and I think about the system as a whole and our dependence on standardized testing and that sort of thing. And I brought this up the last time. It causes a lot of stress, of course, in the system, that to have a certain type of testing that then makes people want to teach, like, the test will appear and make sure all that content is covered. And I think about, in terms of our systems, how our schools are structured, and the idea of test integrity, and the fact that we're structured by age, not necessarily, so you could be a third grader, but you might not even have the skills of a third grader, or you might have the skills of an eighth grader. We don't know, right? We're putting you in there just because of your age. We also have the idea of bells. So learning has to start at a certain time and it has to stop at a certain time. And it doesn't matter if you're deeply involved, you need to stop and move on. So how your mind has to shift and you need to move. We're also talking about the uniqueness of children. Yet when you have methodologies and that sort of thing where you're highly focused on making sure certain things are taught that year, you are teaching to 80% of the class starting there, right? Then you maybe are doing some assessments, finding weaknesses, breaking into smaller groups, but it's all really about that one content piece. So it's not necessarily, you know, a problem of curiosity like what Ilya would be suggesting, where a student would be highly engaged in finding an answer to a problem. So, you know, you have that. So when I think about those challenges, those are nationwide cultural barriers in a lot of ways. You get certain parents that would say, you can't give up those bells, or I don't want my third grader mixed with kindergartners or mixed with eighth graders, right? I want them, like the idea of a multi-age classroom is common in a lot of systems, and it can be very effective, but it's not common in the regular system, public school system. So you have that. And then finally, the question, and I'm asking all these questions because I don't have all the answers. I do love the ideas, and I have definitely seeked out many of these methods for, you know, my own kids. But I think in terms of, we do have a large population of students. We have disabilities of all ranges that we have to make sure we consider those children. Children that come in, like I mentioned, at all different levels on the spectrum as far as where they're at according to what the grade level, you know, standard is, and where are we going to place them. Children coming in with a lot of different needs and coming from different backgrounds where we're fulfilling more needs even than just the learning needs. So nationwide, we have a huge weakness in the area of mental health, I think, for adults. And so you have children coming from homes of adults that are, you know, there's a lot of challenges in the home. So if we had, you know, I think a perfect biosphere or something where we could just put exactly what we want, it would be perfect. But there are a lot of variables out there. And I think that the idea of active learning can actually be applied across many contents and with standards, and it is a strategy, and you can integrate that strategy and as a teaching strategy. But to revamp the system, we really need to look at it from the ground up, talking about performance-based assessments, getting away from the idea of what's the right answer, you know, really looking at the structure of our school systems and what would that do to the security assessments, right? That's a whole nother thing. Can children move freely? Because if you have a lockdown, where are they? And how do you track them down? Just little things like that, right? You, can they move every day to go to where their area of interest is, into a different room? If so, again, when you do lockdown, how do we know, you know, where, if we can't find that child, where's the first place? Where do we look now, kind of thing. So there are a lot of security pieces that are built into those bells and that schedule. And so, yeah, I think I'm just posing more questions now, but those were my thoughts as we were talking, because I love the idea, but I also, you know, looking at the reality, thinking how, if I built my own school, right, how could I make this work? And I think we could make it work, but I think that we would have, I think as we started that planning, there are a lot of questions layered that we would really have to address and work through, for sure. It's not quick and easy.
Well, we're not discussing an easy topic, to be honest with you. So I really appreciate what you're saying. I also like the idea of kind of exploring different avenues of how education can be delivered optimally with the best benefit for children, not just for a child, but for groups of kids, so that they can work as collaboratively and so to some degree as independently in groups as possible. But what I think about in terms of protection, what strikes me is that, again, as I said in the beginning, we're putting too much focus on this assumption that that an incident is likely to happen, and all we need to concentrate on is how to react to that incident. What we're not paying attention to as consultants is at asking questions of, well, to what degree are parents involved in supporting students' mental health? To what degree are they communicating or together with school and working together with school to minimize or remove this issue of marginalized children? To what degree can we collaborate as adults to create this safer environment where there are, let's just call it for argument's sake, early warning systems, better early warning systems, where we as parents are not locked into our own mindset and are free to communicate, to say that I feel like this child needs help, even if I'm not their parent. Okay. Yes, I understand variety of privacy issues and concerns, but you know what? Someone has to speak up. And unfortunately, as we've seen in many incidents, a lot of perpetrators in recent school shootings have been neglected by their own family, or sometimes didn't have enough of a family unit to look after them. And those around them all knew that there was something brewing, and they didn't say anything. So my concern is that we're not asking enough questions about how to build early warning systems so that we can actually implement the ideas that you, Ilya, and you, Julia, are discussing. So in my view, like Greg was saying, have much more curiosity as a consultant. Really try to understand how the community operates, because it is a community at the end of the day. How proactive are people? Is there some sort of an early warning system that the school supports and the parents support? Because if there is a disconnect, then we're back at square one, and we have to go and teach more active shooter drills, which is in my view, is the last thing I want to do. I want to start with that child who's sitting in the corner and is looking around, feeling like they've been left out. Okay, and if I'm not able to notice it, be it if I'm a parent or if I'm an educator, I haven't done my job. It's that easy. So I feel that I wholeheartedly agree with you. I wish I could spend more time and tell you how Hong Kong International School does it. They're absolutely amazing at this. There is really a strong community around children, and everybody really puts in a huge effort to align. And I'm sure that with your experience, it seems it's kind of heading in that direction, or is very similar to what my experience is with my kids. So I want to move this to Ilya, because we're kind of closing our second round. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity to share with us some of the questions or some of the thoughts about how we can further enhance the system. So I'll give you another 3 to 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad Julie brought up the transitioning, kind of the cultural aspects, and how do you transition, because that's honestly the hardest part. We can propose there honestly decades, if not a century, of books on how to do a lot of this better. And you look at like Common Core, we made a tiny change in mathematics education. Not even where we need to go to really have good math education. If you've read Lockhart's Lament, just a tiny little toward that direction, not even, and people lost their minds. So that's not how I did math. And it's like, yeah, because you got taught to compute, and we have computers now and they're dirt cheap. Why would I pay you to do that? You need to learn mathematics and learn about finding the patterns. And so of many children I've shared this with, my niece is not digging, she's 12 now, she's not digging math at school, because why would you? It's taught horribly. And so her dad asked me, he's like, hey, can you tell her about math? Like, why is it important, all this? And I'm like, hey, why do we do math? And you get a lot of interesting answers from kids. Because you hate us, because you want to punish us, because like all kinds of stuff. And it's like, oh. And then you get the better answers that are still wrong, which is like, because it's useful, because you get paid more for doing it. Sure. Because it teaches you a different way to think. Oh, we're starting to get closer to the answer. That's not terrible, but it's still not the best answer. It's real simple. We do math because it's a cheat code. Literally, you look at the history of flight, all kinds of moronic machines, flapping umbrellas and bullshit, like stuff that didn't work. Thousands of failed attempts over how many decades? And then we learned math. And now, if we want to make a hypersonic plane that flies at Mach 16 times faster than sound, where the air coming through the scramjet is moving faster than the speed of sound, like we can do that. We can punch it into a big fancy CFD system, and we can model the whole thing out, and then we can build it, and we can fly it. It works the first time. Might need a little bit of tweaks here and there because the model's not perfect, but it works pretty well the first time. So math is a shortcut. And this is, again, going back to that kind of holistic view. we should be teaching kids, these are the tools. Like, you're going to have problems you want to solve in your life. Here are the tools to solve those problems. And you got to get them into the right mindset. So to speak about like security and how do we get to that, we spend so much time on active shooter training and all this, and it's rare. It happens and it makes the headlines because it's a horrific thing, but it doesn't happen very often. What is starting to be a everyday, if not every minute occurrence, just looking through some emails earlier from the contact form on my website, and guess how many of those? We've had 3 approaching 400 emails since I put that form up. And at first it was pretty quiet. No one had found it. So, you know, nothing for the first 2-3 weeks. We've gotten several emails a day from this form, and one is not garbage. One is not a scam or sketchy as hell out of almost 400 emails. So we're like, you know, 0.25% rate of, so this is a deluge, and that's a relatively low error rate. Like most people, your email address, you put it out there, you're going to get a lot more than 3 or 4 a day. So when we look at some stuff we're talking about with regard to school safety and security, you need to teach kids to get into that mindset of how do you ask those questions like Greg was talking about. Ask those open-ended questions, understand what's going on. As far as threats from the school, or the students themselves, if you look at a lot of the incidents, these kids are not the popular kid that's going and shooting up the school. They're kids who are basically being abused either at home and or by other classmates. People forget how vicious school is. Every single movie out there makes a point of like bullying the, you know, used to be the smart kids, and now that's how you make a ton of money, so less so now. But you find an unpopular group, school is vicious. It's full on Lord of the Flies at most places. And teachers and administrators try, but we all know they don't catch even half of it. There's a lot of subtle ways where you start making fun of someone and they're like, don't say that anymore. So you choose another word, you choose another phrasing. Like there's a whole kind of subculture there because again, the teachers aren't an active part. They're up here, they're separate from, they're observing this external thing. They're not part of that cohort, part of that group. And it's more than just age difference or cohort difference. It is a very, the whole dynamic is different. So that's part of it, is changing it, giving more agency, giving more ownership. And one of the first schools I went to, our class sizes were never more than 14 kids. So that helps a lot right there. Yep. There's also some selection of who was there, which obviously that's another thing. When you have to take everyone, you have to have a broader mindset. But there was a lot more agency. Like we didn't have janitors. Like there was the job jar, which was both a punishment and also just a practicality. Like, hey, you got to clean up the classroom. And I was shocked when I did some substitute teaching. It looked like a hurricane came through because they have janitors. And I'm like, what is all this? And again, first school I went to, we were the ones sweeping the floor, cleaning stuff up. So you're not going to just throw the trash on the floor. You might pull that from the job jar today, and you got to clean up a whole bunch more stuff. Why would you sabotage yourself? So, and the same thing in the military. There's no janitors in the military. Guess who gets to clean everything? All of you and your unit. So there is something to be said for getting some ownership there. And once you have some ownership and also having agency, again, that same school, the first thing we did, and we did it every several months, but the first thing we did, we had these desks that weren't square. They were kind of a trapezoid shape. And each kid would get a handful of these wooden trapezoid blocks in the same count as the number of desks that year. And you had to come up with a layout for it. And so like we came up with all kinds of layouts, and some were awesome and some were cool looking, but really impractical. Like I remember one was like this whole C with a hole in it. And so all the kids were just in this circle around the instructor, which actually was terrible because he's standing in the middle and he's like trying to talk to all the kids and make eye contact and having to constantly switch back and forth. And you can't keep your eye on the whole class. Not that there were any behavioral issues really, are pretty minor there, but still you couldn't just see everyone. You had to move constantly. But we tried stuff, and then we would all talk about next time when we voted on the next layout, like what did we like about the last one? What did we hate about the last one? And again, it gave agency and teaching kids that there are problems and it's your job to solve them. And these are not external things that we're making you do. Like we're trying to give you knowledge and give you shortcuts and teach you a process for solving problems, your problems, other people's problems, solving problems. Figuring out what's the scale of this. Is this something we can solve? Do we have the knowledge? Do we have the resources? And part of that is, again, how is this going to be misused? How is someone going to be a jerk and they're going to ruin what we're doing? And that goes back to security. and keeping an eye on that. And again, when you have that agency and you're like, oh, no, you're not going to mess up my school because this is my school. Getting rid of that adversarial element between the faculty and the staff and the kids, which is so common in most US schools. Like, I think there's less of that. And that goes back to the cultural stuff in other countries. School is seen, I've watched a handful of anime and I look at some, I'm like, wow, that's not at all how we saw the school. And there is more of an ownership, and there is, you know, I guess there are class tours and all this just like we had. But yeah, I'm like, no, people are like, oh, you have to stay home tomorrow. Yes. You know, like I was never like, oh, I don't get to go to school today. Every time I was like, I never understood how suspension was supposed to be a bad thing. Like somehow I didn't get in trouble all the time, but I'm like, oh, wow, I have to stay home for a week. That sounds awful. And by awful, I mean like the best thing ever. The only reason I'm not doing that on purpose is because apparently it'll ruin my whole grades and everything. But otherwise, dude, sign me up. What do I do to get suspended? Like every week, please. So anyway, so having that, again, bringing it together, making the school once again part of the community. And that Montessori school, one thing we did every holiday, for Thanksgiving, for Halloween, for all this, it was a community. All the parents would come for Thanksgiving. We would do a massive school-wide potluck, which when you have, you know, that few students, so everyone and all their family is like 200 to 300 people, that's doable. If you have a school where you have thousands of students, a little less doable to do a 20,000 person potluck. But there was a really strong sense of community and ownership, and not an adversarial setup between the different people, you know, again, staff and students. And I think that goes a long way. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Point well taken. I don't have enough time to comment on it. Let's go to closing remarks. Greg, please share with us 30 seconds what stands out to you from this session, from this conversation. What are you picking up? And what do you think is one thing that could work, you feel, for maybe making a change?
I would say I guess the questions, like I was harping on that, but putting them in, customizing them in different ways for the different end users, from teachers, school administrators, what have you, and that's something where I think of this. I don't, knowing who the players are, having customized questions for each one, and then kind of pushing it back out, and then seeing where there's incongruencies are in some responses for like a security-oriented questionnaire.
So in other words, looking for inconsistencies or consistencies in the way you're interacting with the school community. Right. If you're, however many different people you're able to interview. And that's part of the assessment process. And this is something that we can take away for us as practitioners. Got it. Julie.
Really, I feel very appreciative of the time spent today. I feel like it has generated for me many questions, and it makes me think deeply about a lot of things I care about as far as education. I think educators and the education world, it's full of some of the most passionate and well-educated people that I know. And I do think, you know, things are improving all the time. And I do think that we really do what is best for kids. And I think that this has been a really great conversation, and I look forward to exploring these topics further. I think it's good. It's good to challenge and think about ways that we can improve and that things can change.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Ilya.
So I think that it's going to be about changing mindset. I think that's the most important thing. And I think partly, as Julie pointed out, honestly, the hardest part of that is going to be changing the mindset of the community. Like, honestly, having done a lot with schools, like the schools and the kids, especially students, and then also the teachers are right there with them. They're ready for a change. They know what to do. They are being constrained by legal requirements and testing requirements and all this external stuff. So really, if we can get that societal recognition of, hey, let's let the teachers do their job. They're smart. They know what needs to be done. They talk to these kids every day. Let's back off and let them do what needs to be done. And I think you'd see a rapid change. Like it would happen almost overnight if we could just do that. So it really comes back to cultural change.
Got it. Thank you very much. If I could summarize everything you mentioned, is where it directs my thinking as I'm learning from you. So it seems like the work is obviously very complex in order to create a lot of this positive change. I feel like some of this work lives outside of school districts and school facilities necessarily. I feel like it has to be done somewhere at a more of a system-wide level where some enablement can come through, and just overall support for like Ilya said, the teacher community and the parent communities and the children could come from let's say federal legislation, adjustment and infusion of flexibility in how schools operate, reduction of testing, or being more thoughtful about how tests are administered in general and why they serve as such important metrics or benchmarks for children's further development, and should they. Then I'm hearing that there is a collaborative component, which I love, because the more collaboration we build into children behavior, into their teamwork, the less you'll see kids being left behind and kids being marginalized. And the more you'll see social awareness, social cognition being developed, which also plays into the hands of us security practitioners, because once I see those results, it's easier for me to determine, okay, is the school suffering from, let's say, excessive bullying, excessive incidents where you have marginalized kids or kids are not looked after properly. So that's something that I can immediately turn into either a negative or a positive, but at least into some form of advice and prevention. So thank you for all those thoughts. Hopefully there will be some feedback to this conversation. And if you think of taking further steps of how we can discuss other topics that are kind of at this nexus of education and protection, I would love to hear them and to get your thoughts on that. And I certainly look forward to continuing these discussions. Thank you very much. You've stayed with us for more than an hour once again, and that's my fault. I really appreciate your time. Please stay safe, and I wish you all well.